this episode, I interviewed Patrick from Microsoft in Denmark to discuss killer demos and pre-sales. Listen, we discuss a lot of things, so check out the show notes. I'll put links to anything that he referenced, tools, materials, etc. in there. It'll be on nz365guy.com/37. I'd like to thank the generous contribution from our sponsor CRM, UG. The Dynamics 365 user group is the world's most influential user group community of Microsoft Dynamics 365 and CRM users and partners. Across the globe, members share a common goal of maximizing and advancing the performance of Microsoft Dynamics 365 and CRM so that individuals and companies can improve operations, overcome obstacles, and exceed goals. Hi everyone, I'm here with Patrick Kitchell to discuss killer demos and pre-sales. Patrick is a Dynamics CRM technical professional at Microsoft in Denmark, helping customers understand and leverage the immense potential from their CRM solution. He has a keen eye for data and is passionate about finding the right business processes to help drive success. Patrick is originally from northern New Jersey, and he's been living and working in Copenhagen, Denmark for the last 16 years with his family. He's previously lived and worked in New York City, operating a social service program assisting the homeless, persons and drug-addicted people. He is curious about technology, social media, and is it online gaming you're into?
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Patrick, it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me on your show. It's a pleasure to be here.
Excellent. So I got in touch with Patrick as in someone referred him to me on LinkedIn for being just brilliant when it came to demoing Dynamics, and so I thought it'd be great to get somebody that's a rock star in the space on the show. But Patrick, can you tell us about your career, where you started, how did you end up at Microsoft, and your experience with Dynamics?
How many days you got? No. Yeah, I was born and raised in northern New Jersey. There's 12 generations of Kitchells actually that live in New Jersey, so I was kind of one of the first ones to move away. I moved into New York City, had a chance to work with homeless people. It was a really interesting 4.5 years in New York City. It's where I met my Danish wife, and one of the key enablers to go to Europe. I ended up moving to London actually for 1.5 years to study, and then ended up in Denmark in 1998. And actually, that job working with homeless people and my first job in Denmark as a teacher, I would consider one of the two major skill sets that I use on a continual basis for the rest of my career. And I got into Dynamics when I was hired by a company called Jabra, GN, and they were migrating the first version of Dynamics to version 3.0. So I actually started on what I would consider version 1.2, migrating to 3.0. And that's where I was actually introduced into Dynamics. And I've actually just been along ever since.
Wow.
So
that's interesting. And so that company, how did that progress to you ending up at Microsoft?
Yeah, well, I ended up leaving that company and becoming a consultant. And then I had some personal issues where I left the consulting business, some health issues. And then I came back and started working at Sitecore. I worked 5 years working as their internal CRM manager. I spent a lot of time integrating Sitecore and Dynamics and good stuff like that. And it was through Sitecore that I would speak at a lot of marketing events for Sitecore, because at that time when I was doing it, it was really cutting edge about putting your CRM system and your marketing, intelligent marketing platforms together. So I would do a lot of talks about how to do this stuff, even though it wasn't in my job description. And I met someone at Microsoft who, after they saw me speak 1.5 years later, invited me to a cup of coffee at Microsoft. And basically got hired to Microsoft from there. So
Wow. So your focus now in Microsoft is still on Dynamics?
Yes, I love Dynamics.
Yeah.
I've always loved Dynamics. So
It's so funny, is that term love of, the technology is something I'm commonly hearing, in the conversations I have all around the world, is that those that really get it and are in there almost like lifers for Dynamics, they do really have a passion for, how it can transform people's lives and businesses and things like that, through the technology.
Absolutely.
So we're going to talk about, creating the killer demo, and I'm really interested to get your perspective on what works and what doesn't. Can you tell me a bit about the role that a demo plays in selling software?
Yeah, so maybe I'll start by saying I'm not a traditional pre-sales guy. So actually the first pre-sale job I ever had was actually at Microsoft. But I would say in modern selling that everybody in the business does some type of pre-sales. at some level, right? So, we are basically seen, an openness of information everywhere. Like when I worked in Sitecore, even though I didn't do any official selling, people knew me through Twitter and through LinkedIn, and I was participating at that level. And I would say today that if you go read Gartner information around demos, that today demos are an important part of the sales process through the entire sales process. So if you think you're just going to do one demo in a large deal, you're probably going to do multiple demos. And I would consider us to be the demo masters, if you like to call us. We're like the modern blacksmith, right? So we sit around the campfire and hear about stuff that is needed, and then we go into our shop there and begin to come up with things that will basically make the lives of the better of the people who are telling us their stories, right? And that's kind of how I see it. So it's a very important part of everything that we do in a sales process, these demos.
Yeah.
So
how soon into a sales process do you think that it's time to start showing stuff to a customer from a demo perspective?
You see, this is a really tricky topic. I actually thought about this quite a bit because we go through this quite a bit. And you must remember that there are many more stakeholders in a sales process today, and the customer knows lots of information. So what I experience is that customers have seen videos, have maybe been online and actually downloaded or have a 30-day trial, and have been playing actually with the product. So if you're going to give let me just show you the face of the product, that can actually happen quite early. And it doesn't have to be a big, customized demo. It can be just like, this already. Do you have questions about this? Let's go through this. So you can actually show the product quite early in the sales process.
Okay, so what information do you typically like to have before you go in to do a demo? Like, what research is in your typical, right, what's on your checklist type thing that you want to make sure or you've got in the back of your mind before you're going to go in and do a demo to a company?
Yeah, if we're going to do so, if I want to talk about doing a full-fledged, storytelling demo, not these kind of vanilla flyby demos, they're very important. But usually that's not where the decision is made. That might just be one of the doors that need to be opened to get you further. So it's very important. When we're going to go in and start talking to a business about creating value through dynamics, for example, I like to see stakeholder mapping. So I would like to see who we're talking to and how they're related to the people in the organization, and do we have the right group of people? So the dynamics in the group we're speaking to need to be very important. I do company information. So I go on LinkedIn, Sales Navigator, and find out if the company growing, what's going on, maybe see their financials. Then I like to have discovery and an expectation setting. So I like to know what we're doing there, why we're there, what it is that they need, why are they, what it is that they're looking for in a system, why is it dynamics, get this kind of whole understanding about what's going on inside of the organization. And that's depending on the sales process itself and the customer. Then you can have multiple discovery sessions, but that's usually what I use when I go in. It's very important to know what the customer is struggling with. So their pains are extremely important because I try to build stories around the pains that they have.
Yeah, excellent. So a couple of things you mentioned there. One, you talked about using LinkedIn Sales Navigator to do your research. Are you only using LinkedIn Sales Navigator, or are you using any other type of tooling around getting the background there on that company?
Yeah, we have access because of Microsoft, lots of industry data. So I use industry data. I go on Twitter. So I actually have an MSE, a Microsoft Social Engagement tenant running. And if we know we're going to have a long sales cycle around a large customer, usually go in the Microsoft Social Engagement and fire in some hashtags around that company and their competitors, and find out the kind of pulse and feel around this company if this is possible. So.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So you're actually using a whole range of digital resources there to pull in the broadest picture of that customer that you can find.
I was just going to say, we have business value assessment guys that go in and do in-depth work around creating business value. And they usually go through their company's financials and the competitors' financials and kind of see where they benchmark to their competitors. And I think that this type of information, where you really want to go in and touch on pain points, is very valuable. Go in with factual pain points and then discover if they're true or not is very, very valuable information.
Okay, so that's brilliant. You do that from a Microsoft perspective. I just want to change tack slightly, but on the same subject here is, of the partners that you've observed, are they doing the same type of rigor that you see that you're going through, or do you think there's room for improvement around that rigor? And what are the good partners doing well, and what are the ones that are not? And I'm just talking about the discovery phase here for setting up the demo. What's your thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, it's like you can if you're in America and you bat 300. You have a good day and you have a bad day. So just like us, we have good days, bad days. I've seen also the same with the partners. It's a mix. Sometimes we see partners who have really great days, who do really great discovery. But what I think is important, instead of going that direction, is that if you're going to do a deal where you invite a partner in, or a partner invites Microsoft in, the more collaboration you have with that partner and you do discovery together and you share things together, the better everything becomes, actually. And the times where I've really felt really empowered by working with partners is when we've actually, worked together as a team to do it together. Because Microsoft can't do it alone, and the partner can't do it without Microsoft. So,
yeah. Very good, very good. Okay, so at what point in the sales cycle do you see demos coming into play? And what I'm talking about here is, let's say you either are deciding to target a company that you haven't really covered or uncovered a need, or are you really dealing with customers that have already been pre-identified, or if you like, the customer is self-selected in across any of Microsoft digital assets. Yep. Let's say they've filled out a form, they've said somewhere, they've downloaded a white paper, and they've said, hey, there's obviously a interest in Dynamics because someone has taken an action on the customer side. Let's start at that point. Give me time frames, give me whatever steps, what other parties are involved, etc., getting to that point that you're like, okay, it's demo time.
Yeah. From a Microsoft perspective, my job is to ensure that the technical decision, that they're comfortable making the technical decision. So usually a technical pre-sales person in Dynamics and Microsoft doesn't usually get involved in the opportunity until it's qualified by a salesperson, right? So, and then we basically join the party from there. So if this was like Lord of the Rings, we kind of join them after they've already started their journey. So from my perspective, I have the opportunity has to be qualified at 20%. I think this is kind of like how warm is 20%. We have some guidelines around that. So there is already some discussion going on with the salesperson. There are some needs that have already been met, maybe even some discovery that the salesperson has done when we come on board. And usually a salesperson will come to us beforehand and say, this customer, we know in a week or two, I'm going to need your assistance. You're going to have to come to a meeting and then basically get onboarded and start from there. When a salesperson says to me that they've done discovery, and I believe them, of course, but I like to participate in discovery because I have my own set of questions. So, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, interesting. No, the reason I've been in scenarios where, someone said, listen, I've set up a meeting, I've done the discovery, I need this and this and this, and it's just come in and demo something. And I'm like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
I'm like, well, hang on a second.
We've all been there.
Just to waltz in and do a demo without really knowing what is the issue and what is the, we'll touch on it in a moment, generic demos and the place that they might have, but, I'm like, a red flag is going up and I'm only just starting on this deal. I'm concerned.
Yeah.
How do you handle that? How do you kind of let's back up, let's gather a bit more information, let me know, and is the customer even expecting, me to demo? I've walked in, I've been sitting around a boardroom table, a whole bunch of people in there, and then they just turn to you and go, okay, can you show us something? And I'm like, oh my gosh,
There's nothing worse than a pre-sales technician fears most than having an ad hoc demo.
Yeah.
And I don't even mean that, can you show us something? Having an ad hoc question asking demo. Oh, now you show me that. What about this? Can you show me that? Can you show me that? Where it's not, where the expectations aren't known, and on top of it, you don't know what they're going to ask. So to me, that's the worst possible scenario actually to be in. But when it succeeds, it's one of the best outcomes you can have. So it's like an odd kind of a thing. I've been in one last year where I went into a customer, gave a vanilla demo on field service, went back there 2 months later, where they actually sent me some questions. We went in there, I showed them what they wanted to see, and then they just started firing away for a whole hour. And I just sat there like thinking to myself, oh my goodness. But they bought and they loved it. And they loved that we were flexible and agile. So it's like,
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
but I totally agree with you. I've been in demo scenarios where it's been show them a vanilla X. And then I've actually in scenarios had customers raise their hand and say, I don't understand why you're showing us this.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the other one. I've been in those demos where like I've been a party to them and you can see the audience rolling their eyes and go like, but it's kind of like the demo person is on their mission to finish. This is the whole scenario. I'm going to take you to the end.
I don't do that.
You know,
what do you do? I mean, when
out.
they roll eyes like that, I'm really like an improv kind of person. I like this kind of storytelling, but if I see that it's not connecting, I will stop my demo and start asking questions instead. I say, okay, look, guys, this is not obviously something's wrong or something is not, let's have a discussion around what it is that you need so we can have a better discussion and just start asking questions in the opposite direction. It's a two-way highway. You're there for them and you're there to do your job, of course, but you can always stop up and say, okay, how do you do this? I always ask customer questions in all of my demos.
Yeah, yeah. It's so important. So important.
Even in big demos where there's 30 people in a room. I've done big demos where I say, why don't you explain to me how it works in your organization? I'm going to tell you a story around John, who is a salesperson. But what do you guys actually do?
Yeah. Yeah, very good, very good. So you kind of turn it in flight into a bit of discovery as well to drill a bit more.
Absolutely. When I get done with the story, for example, and I just begin asking them questions. I will specifically, and I say to them, how is it that you guys actually do this? And how could it be that this story could match more your story? Right? And let them just tell us about it, because the more they say and the more they see themselves in your story, your demo, the more they'll connect with you, the more they'll trust you.
Yeah, yeah. I've found as well is that like if I'm tag teaming, I'm in there with salespeople, is that often they will take questions from me a lot quicker than they'll take questions from a salesperson, and they'll answer more honestly because they don't see you as the salesperson. They see you as kind of, the technology, like you're the as you say, you're the blacksmith, you're the kind of the tradesman in the craft, and then they see the salesperson and as the person trying to sell them the tech, and so they're kind of, there's no barrier, to how they'll talk with you as to how they'll often filter what they say to a salesperson.
I feel like Kramer from Seinfeld. I guess I feel like this guy that, if you know Kramer from Seinfeld, he's quite an honest fellow, and if you ask him a question and you think he's going to sugarcoat it, he just doesn't do it. And I feel like that's our job. Our role is to be as honest as possible in the boundaries that are there to the customer.
I named my first cat Cosmo after Cosmo Kramer. So
one of my best episodes is this woman that says, "Why don't we introduce her to Kramer? Because he'll tell her that her hair is old fashioned or something." So we'll just it's like this guy that just asked Patrick. He'll tell you, So
that's so good.
This is the job of a technician: one foot in hard reality, the other foot in the inspirational side that knows that where the technology is going and can go, and where companies can dream themselves to those positions and still make them possible.
Yeah. So good, so good. Okay, so let's just talk about the generic demo. Is there a place for it? Where does it fit in your approach, do you find? And kind of, if I was to say, give me a half-hour generic demo, what's your must-have in that demo type setup?
I believe in generic demos, actually. I believe in, so if you imagine a customer who has seen the product or has seen other vendors' products who maybe have been playing with all this stuff, they want you to show it to them, right? So I think this is a very important part of the sales process, that by showing it to them and showing that what you're saying about it is true, actually goes a long way to build trust with these people. So last year, for example, I had a demo environment. I did a lot of field service and customer service demos where 75% of my demo environment was what I would just call static. I reused it over and over again, and I just mixed and matched stories around this environment, and I just made this environment as stable as possible. And I added, so I did full customer service, full field service demos off of it, and I could show up, and I didn't like to do this, but within 2 days. But if another TSP would say, or a partner TSP would say, do you have an environment that I could borrow, an MSE I can borrow? If you have, yes, you just go use this. It has everything in it. Here it is. You make your own story.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think that this idea about having a demo environment that is up and running, where you can just tell stories on the demo environment, I think it's a very powerful thing to have because it shows a level of flexibility that might not be available to other vendors.
Yeah. That's just raised another little quick sidebar for me. So, when you let someone else in your environment, and do you kind of like make sure you got a snapshot like in a sandbox instance so that if they kind of play too hard and destroy your environment to how you like it, that you just kind of flip a sandbox back over? And
No, I have actually last year I didn't. No, so I didn't do this, right? And there was only my local people who was in it and said, if you need something done, let me do it. You know, I have, so basically not to lie, but I've made it into a solution that I've exported basically, right? And I've exported some of the data and some of the stuff.
Yep.
So like for example, I have an entity called web activity, which is basically something that I would use as an activity type to show what people have been doing on the website. And I have a whole bunch of data points. So I've made a bunch of channels, sub-channels, make nice dashboards. So I would export all this data, and then I would export the entity as a solution so that I could just import it again if I wanted to do it. This year, I don't have this. I'm not making a demo environment. I'm using something that Microsoft is offering to us internally, live drives, which I'm going to base the same scenarios. Because for me, it's not the environment, it's the story.
Yeah.
Like I don't even...
I've just got access to the same environments, and they just gave them out to MVPs recently.
Yeah.
The same playground is for, was it MVPs they gave it to? I think it was MVPs they gave it to. Yeah, and they're brilliant. They're great setups, all loaded, ready to go scenario wise. So
Yeah.
they are good.
But this is really important, and I think it's a thing that I've learned about in Microsoft. When I first joined 3 years ago, we talked a lot about technology, and I don't want to talk about technology. I want to use the technology as an enabler to fulfill needs that the customers have. So if you go in and say, look, I'm going to show you Power BI, and then I'm going to show you this, and then you start naming technologies, most customers don't care.
Yeah, exactly.
So
exactly.
We sometimes would play games where we would say, can you do one complete demo without ever mentioning a Microsoft technology?
I love that.
Do it.
That is
It's so
brilliant.
good. And then when the licensing comes, that's a whole different discussion. But you can do the demos and tell the stories without ever mentioning the product that you're in. And I think that is a much better story to tell. I would say on this point here, because you asked, about these generic demos, you have a question to me, how do you tailor your technique to presentation? And I just wrote down as a side note, the more intimate you are with the customer, the more trust that you build, and the more they want to see as a discussion topic, not as an end-all proposition. So demos become a discussion topic. It becomes this fireplace to sit around and talk about what it is they're doing and how you can fulfill that need, right? And the more times you can tell stories over a sales process to the same group of people, the more that they'll trust you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So I totally agree. Now, what happens when you've got a quiet room?
Never have a quiet room. I've never had a quiet room.
Yeah.
I ask questions.
Yeah.
Okay, I've had some. I'll give you asking here. One of the worst scenarios I've ever been. One of the worst demos I've ever been to was an all-day demo, 3-4 hour workshop with a customer, where the vice president didn't want Microsoft. Period. Came in the first after I started. So I started with an introduction. Blah blah blah. Came in, slammed his hand on the table, says, "I don't understand why you're here. I don't understand why we're doing this." Completely disrupted everything.
Yeah.
Right? And that's why I just put my hands down on the table and I just said, okay, you weren't here to start. Let me explain what we're doing. I didn't know who he was. And then I just started asking lots of questions. Talk to me. What it is that you want to see. What it is, what's going on in your business. And just talk and just start asking questions, as many questions as possible until they feel heard. He actually got up and left. We finished. We lost that case anyway, but it was a disaster from that perspective, but it doesn't have to be quiet.
Yeah. But yeah, I've been in those demos. I know what you mean. You don't win them all.
Look, a demo is not. I've been watching a lot of Lord of the Rings videos lately. It's not the Mines of Moria. It's not set in stone. It's a fluid thing. You prepare 75% of the way. In my eyes, you have a full story. Everything's ready to go. And then you improvise along the way of this demo also to take into considerations the things they ask you, the things that they nod their heads to, so you inflate the good things while you're talking about it. And you touch on the things that you see that maybe you can't cover in a demo. You can park them. But I let them ask questions running and stuff like this. So, improvisation is important. I have a demo that I did to banks where I take my son with them as a young entrepreneur, and I create a whole marketing scenario around them creating marketing around a young entrepreneur. how my son wants to be this entrepreneur, and I tell the story about how he earns money, and I just make it so personal, to me that it becomes personal to them also, right? Oh yeah, I can see this, and they start asking, lots of questions, so.
It's good. So what mistakes do you see people make when it comes to demoing? So you've been in some, you're bound to have been across your career in some ones that didn't go well, but I want to kind of drill into what could have been done or avoided or what were the lessons learned from those to make sure that it didn't happen in your own demos type thing?
Yeah. I wrote down actually first point for this item was people get lost when they make their start. So so you need to have a clear line, I think, of how you're going to allow people to ask questions during your demo, right? And I love that people ask questions, which leads to the second part of it. You need to understand your story that you're telling. So if you just take a story that you've downloaded from Microsoft or someone else's computer, you better practice that sucker a lot. You better know exactly where you're supposed to click, what you're actually talking about. If you don't do that, then there's a disconnect between what you're presenting and doing, the story you're telling, and everything else. And this is where I see a lot of people get lost. That's why I take the demo stories that they offer as a Microsoft and I tweak them to myself, because I like to make them personal in such a way that it's my story that I'm telling, not me as in me. I use my son, that's an example. But I tell these stories, I make them personal, and I dry run these a lot. So people get lost and they don't practice enough. And if you're working with a partner, they don't do dry runs with partners. They don't, you know what I mean? Like, you have to sit in a group and practice your demos and take criticism around your demos and do it many, many, many times.
Yeah, good. So you don't use AdventureWorks cycles or FabricCAD?
No, not at all.
Yeah. Mate, they were back in the day, right? Or the main stories.
Back in the day. Yeah. But again, remember, it's the story. So listen, and also, what I think is super important, what I like to do is I ask another TSP to come with me with demo and sit in the audience and take notes. Right?
Yeah,
so
it's great.
Sales guy is like orchestrating this day. Demo is part of this day, and their job is like a host. They're there to present Microsoft. They're there to present maybe vision and the inspiration and the dreams. You're just a part of this, this marriage this wedding or whatever you like to say. And it's good to have someone else who is not deeply involved, because you can get tunnel vision while you're doing the demo, right? So I take another guy with us. We try to go on twos where they can just take notes, pick up all the small pieces, all the questions. And if we're running out of time, say, I'm going to park this question. If you don't mind, Jens is going to write it down. That's the one guy we usually go out with. We'll come back to this at the end of the session or in the break, or we'll set up a next session with you, right? And I think that's also an issue that I see is next action after your demo should be a part of the demo discussion. Now I've done this for you. What should we do next?
Yeah. Excellent. I always found as tag teaming two people, right? One person can really read the room in detail and see the nuances coming out in their interactions, or, their nonverbal interactions. And it's just a great way to play off, one can be speaking, one's really intently observing. And then, to have that relationship with a peer or colleague is just fantastic.
You also have to remember, if they're doing multiple vendor selections, so they have multiple vendors, and let's just say there's another vendor that's been there first that's been coaching them a little, you must understand they're going to drop bombs and ask questions, so they're going to do things to try to trip you up also. So there's some people that are in love with another vendor. They will do all they can to trip you up. And this is where ping pong tag team is very important.
Brilliant. Yeah, so good.
So
tell us about your process behind creating a demo and ensuring it goes to plan. And so this question is really not about the process of setting up your tenants and things like that, but what is your from woe to go process of preparing yourself for a demo to ensure its best likelihood of success?
So if I was to take an enterprise demo where we're going to spend some time preparing this storytelling demo. So this is not a vanilla demo. This could be that we've had many discovery sessions with the customer, and we're going to prepare something that matches close to their business and will make them feel that we understand them at a very high level. I would say that type of demo, we start probably around 10 business days out, and have discussions around where we feel we have enough discovery. We start building a story around what we know about the customer. right? So we will basically storyboard a demo without technology on a whiteboard. Where we begin to discuss exactly what it is that we are going to show them. And then once we have this story built, where we've written it down on a whiteboard, where we typed it into a Word document, whatever it might be, we present this together with the SSP. This is the story we're going to tell. And then we let them interject ideas into the story, things that they might know about the customer that needs to be said.
Would you run through that with a trusted confidant on the customer side as well, pre-demo?
Yeah, so in the last scenario, we've just been through this story that we've gone where we actually have built a story where we've maybe spin up a brand new environment. So we'll do everything from scratch, let's say, where we start building in very specific stories. Then when we're maybe halfway through, where we go back to the customer and say, we're going to go back to maybe one stakeholder who is responsible, or two stakeholders, and say, this is the direction we're going in with these stories. Is there anything that you would like to add to this? Right. Yeah, and then they can see already ahead of time how this will impact. And we've had scenarios, where they will come back and say, make sure, because this person is going to be there, that you also talk about the Outlook app, talk about, Citrix and Outlook, or, that you touch on these things, how life will be easier. So it's really about what you're going to say, not so much about the technology you're going to show, right? And so, yeah, absolutely. I think the more you run it by the customer, if they'll allow you, towards the end, the better off you are. The more clearer the message is, the better chance you are of delivering this killer demo. And what's the goal of the demo? Could be that the goal of the demo is they don't take a decision about you, but you want them to walk away and feel like that they can trust you, that they can see themselves in you, that you understand their business, you become this trusted advisor, and that they feel comfortable enough coming back and asking you more questions. In fact, I would argue if they don't come back and ask more questions, then that is an indicator that you need to go back and ask them questions. You need to keep the dialogue running all the time.
Yeah. I always have a thing. If they're not talking to you, they're talking to somebody else, and that's not going to advance your sale.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's basically what I think we go through when we do this, and I think my entire TSP, it's not my TSP, but the TSP team I'm in, we go through this process. We build up storylines, discuss them with salespeople, industry experts in Microsoft, account executives, whatever it might be, show them the story. This looks really great. Then we go in and build the story in the system, and then we go in and practice this story. So we dry run this demo multiple times in front of different people.
Good. Is there a secret sauce to creating and executing a killer demo?
Preparation is very important. So I think that the more prepared you are, the better the demo is. I think the secret sauce to me, I wrote down two things: spontaneity. So flexibility goes a super long way. All right. So this idea that as you're demoing and you see that they like what you do, that you continue to, like I was saying, puff up the goodness that you feel coming from the audience in the demo. And the opposite way, if you feel like that it's running aground, that you have the flexibility to start asking questions and get it back on ground. And I wrote down ping-ponging. So we've talked about this. To co-pilot with someone, not just the preparation should involve multiple people. The more people you can demo internally to, dry run to around your story, the better you'll be on the day. And the harder the questions they ask you while you're dry running, the more prepared you'll be for the customer.
Yeah, good.
In fact, I would suggest that you ask for your colleagues to go into a session where you play the customer who is aggressive. So the more, like the army that practices war together, usually does good in war. So, yeah. So those are my.
It's good. I like it.
So
I like it. So the three there: preparation, spontaneity, ping-ponging with a co-pilot, and do lots of dry runs.
The dry runs where the audience plays a role. Like I said, aggressive customer. Lying customer, I don't know, lying customer, but customers are seeing multiple vendors, so they might be shaking their head to yeah, while they're already going to get ready to do with another one, right? So you have to be able to read all these things, right? And that's why Copilot is so important, I think. So,
yeah, so good. Have we talked about a disaster demo there that didn't work out well. Have you had any other major disaster demos that come to mind? And kind of like, what were the lessons learned from those? What were your takeaways?
Yeah, I mean, it's part of the learning process, right? I've had a couple demos in years where I've stood up and where people are just like, I don't know what you're doing here kind of stuff, where you go in to a scenario where for some reason the discovery has not been done, or or you know, I don't really know because there's so for the first thing I would say they hurt a lot actually, and as you remember this is a professional thing, but you can walk away from those days really kicking the can down the road, thinking, "What in my God has just happened? I don't ever want to go through this again." It's like it's having your pants fall down around your ankles in front of a group of people. It's so embarrassing, you're really like, I don't ever want to do this ever again type of stuff. What I learn about this though is that as a technical pre-sales person, and my job is to secure the technical decision at the customer, that requires that I ask tough questions to the salespeople who are in our group. So when they invite me to something or ask me to join something, that I go in and begin to discover against them actually where we are in the process, right? And then it gets controversial here because a lot of sales guys don't like this, but take the position that I can actually call the customer also and ask questions without the salesperson. I think that that's a very important thing to do. If you feel that it's unclear, that you call the customer. Most customers want to talk to Microsoft. It's like you call them up, they want to, oh wow, okay, great, I have some questions. Can I call you back, or can we make an appointment, or please so yeah, so own it, all of it. It's hard, but it's that's the way I think it should be done. So
yeah, no, that's some good insights. Thanks for sharing. So what's your experience with doing online demos versus in-person demos? I've done a lot of in-person and I've done some online where and I think the biggest thing missing for me with the online was I don't get to look into anybody's eyeballs. And that affects how you can demo. However, I have done online demos, in totally different geographies and been massively successful till I got there in person type thing. What's your experience with the two, and what are your kind of takeaways?
I haven't really done that many online demos, to be honest. I've done a couple in the last couple of years. I find them as kind of like, I have the same as you. The thing that I don't like about them most is you actually don't know who's in the room. And not that actually should make a difference, but I always have this feeling like I would like to give a demo where I understand the person that's on the other end and be able to try to connect with them in a way, right? So that's like, I've given both the same online demos where I felt like stakeholders' boss needs to see the product, right? That's the purpose of this online demo, for example, where I go in for half an hour and give them customer service, 15-minute storytelling about how a customer can go on a portal, chat, blah, blah, blah. Give them the story. That's it. Then the person says, this looks great. This is fine. Thank you for your time. Bye. So those are the most of the online demos that I've actually given. So I rarely give long online demos, more than 30 minutes.
Yeah, I can. As I remember one particularly, and it's written in my mind because of losing what I was so used to is that personal connection.
Yeah.
And how it just added a totally different nuance. I would never go for it as a first option if I could avoid it. It would always be there's no other scenario that in this case I needed to be in two parts of the world at the same time,
Yeah.
and so it was the only option available. So yeah,
I would think also, for example, if you got to remember, there's lots of stakeholders involved in selling today, and you might start off with not having all the right stakeholders. So you have people who are just there to talk. You have some people who are actively listening, but they don't have any power. And the stakeholder part of it might move. And this is where I feel like online demos come in quite handy, is if you meet a new stakeholder who doesn't have time to meet, but will show up to a quick look at the product, stuff like this, then you can basically open and close these doors without having to get everybody in one room, because you know how hard it might be to get everybody in one room.
Yeah. Like a one-on-one more type demo, is that what you're talking about in that scenario? Yeah, totally agree. So can you tell me, how do you personally read a customer's reaction during a demo? Kind of what do you remind yourself to do to make sure that engagement works well while you're mid-flight?
Yeah. So for me, what's important is that expectation is set before you actually walk in the room. So there's an agreed agenda, what it is that they would like to see, who's going to be in the room, and make sure that everybody that is there has an understanding about what we're doing there. Right, so that's first thing to know, is actually has everybody on the customer side. So it's kind of like you're preempting the demo with making sure that everybody that's in the room with you understands why they're there, right? And if they don't know why they're there, and I've been in these scenarios where people join a workshop or something where they know absolutely nothing. Wow, what are we doing here kind of stuff. make sure that everybody's kind of up to speed on what we're doing there. That's really the first thing. So the expectation is set about what we're actually doing there, and make sure that they're connected to us and to each other, right? I go out of my way to ask questions to them all the time. So through the entire demo, I try to engage with the customer all the way and ask them how they do it in their company. How does their business operate? Is there, you know what I mean? And try to see if I can get them to reflect themselves like a mirror. I want them, it's platonic. I want them to see themselves in me.
That's so good.
Right. So it's like really important to play this game with them. Right. Oh, I don't know if we can use this. And when they say stuff like this, I don't know, this process doesn't really fit to our process, right? When you've done discovery and you feel like you're kind of to ask that question right there. Okay, how is it that actually your process works? How could you see yourself? How could you see it fitting into this scenario? Like if you were showing dynamic branching process bars that were dynamically branching, and say to them, okay, how could you see yourself baking in your business processes into your organization? Could you name a business process that could it be valuable to actually put in so that it was transparent for everybody to see? And just to ask them, wouldn't it be interesting that you could? I always show them this. For example, take an example. I always show in Power BI we have a business process flow Power BI that shows the stages of the business process and stuff like this. And I think that this idea, people really like this idea that they can actually all of a sudden get high transparency over organizational processes and also be able to understand where processes stop, because they don't know this today in their organization, right? And so tell stories around that and get them deeply involved in what we're talking about. And I was just like, I work really hard to make them participate in my demo. But I think that's really, in some demos, for example, we take devices with us and put them down on the table and say, here you go play, log in. It's logged in. Go do what you have to do. So if the customer is quiet, all quiet, that is a real sign for a lot of stuff. But it could be that there's a reason why they're being quiet. And does not mean that they don't choose you, but it could be they're all introverts. All right? And that's where it becomes harder. But I would still say that you need to find the one person in that room that can crack the nut of the rest of the people. And usually it's not the executive. So there's an executive in the room. They'll steal a lot of time if you let them, but try to get down the chain a little bit and find out how the everyday person works in their job.
Yeah, exactly. Good.
And then you have the co-guy taking all these notes while they're talking, right? So that's why it's super important to have these discussions when you have someone who is actually taking these notes. So when you go back to the office, you can sit down and say, they've told us so much valuable information about what they do.
Yeah. That's brilliant.
Yeah,
I like it.
So,
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, let's just switch gears a bit and look at pre-sales. For you, what does the concept of pre-sales mean? Because I've just found it means so many different things to different people. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so pre-sales for me as a Microsoft technical solution professional, my job is to secure the technical decision out at the customer. That's my job. So it's not just pre-sale. Pre-sale is anything before 80%, and in that bucket between 20 and 80, or you could, all the way out to 0 also, but up to 80%, my job is to make sure that all the technical questions that they might have around Dynamics, surrounding Azure technology, that they feel extremely comfortable doing this. They feel extremely comfortable with the technology, so that decision is actually checked off. And there's a lot of other things in play that are not about. So demo is one piece of pre-sales, but there's lots of other pieces to pre-sales, whether it's proof of concept, whether it's hackathons where you can build and destroy, so there's a lot of things that happen in pre-sales there. But my job is to make sure that when we leave, you can lose a sale and win. And it's not who cares, right? But you win a technical decision, though you lose. And that to me gives us confidence, actually. Because if you can win with the technology through storytelling and whatnot, then it becomes a price game. Then it becomes everything other, right?
Yeah, exactly. So you listed there a proof of concept, a hackathon, the demo. Are there any other moving parts that you see in pre-sales?
I do a lot of inspiration talks, roadmap talks. We talk hackathon, POC. We do RFP, RFIs, which I don't really like that much. And I'll tell you why I don't like them, actually. I don't completely understand why large companies do this, but I see actually in Dynamics, for me, an RFP, if a company says to me, I would like to do an RFP, we're talking like 200 questions, 300 questions, I say that this is a competitor move. This has been triggered by a competitor.
Yep.
And what I would like our salesperson to do, and we've done it before, we don't always do it, is I like to say, no, we don't want to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because,
Yeah, I'm with you.
But
you don't want to be column fodder, right? You don't want to be filling out the third row on their column of potential people when they've already decided on column one.
yeah, I totally, so we do that, RFP, I'm just trying to think of other stuff that we do. I've done also I've gotten in, have customers who own actually Dynamics who within a year they need to renew or start doing maybe a small vendor selection, figuring out, go in and train them a little bit, go in and, so do things. You got to remember, there's pre-sales like we've never sold to you before. There's cross-sell, upsell. Then there is, we need to renew so we can true down or we can expand our footprint. That's also pre-sales. So it's very important to go into these companies who are going to renew in the future and spend some time with them.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. Is there any specific training you could do to take a role in pre-sales?
From my perspective, what I came with a set of skills, and I'll tell you what they are. First of all, I knew the product actually quite well, and I'm not a developer. So from that perspective, I've never developed, but I have done tons of work as actually being a person behind the lines in Dynamics. So I actually own the CRM product, and I've actually worked on it in other companies on a day-to-day basis. So so I've come with this skill set. I've sat with everyday users and struggled through their life using this application, right? And still feel very passionate about it, right? Like, for example, when I go into companies, I think the most powerful tool you have actually in Dynamics, if you own it, is Advanced Find. And if you're not using Advanced Find properly, you're probably not using Dynamics properly.
Yeah.
Right? And if you're not making buckets of lists, something we call marketing lists, that are segmented, like I show these to sales guys how they can do all this, you know what I mean? Then they just freak out, right? So I come with a set of skills where I've actually worked on the product, not as a partner, not as a salesperson, just everyday kind of stuff. That's the first thing. So you have to love it to begin with, or you have to come to love it. Then I feel like I was a teacher beforehand, and I really like people. So when you ask me what motivates you, I'm a people person. I like watching people. I'm motivated around teamwork and collaboration. And that's part of being a good pre-sales person, that you can connect with people, you can look them in the eyes and shake their hand, and you can build trust with them. And building trust means you listen. Talk less, listen more kind of stuff, right? And I would tell every pre-sales person to go take storytelling training.
Excellent. Brilliant.
In person, actually. If you can actually, your company could invite a person to come in and teach you how to stand on a stage, what words you should say, how you should look. That the whole presentation side of it is like super important. Yeah, because once you get that in place and you feel comfortable in front of people on a stage, whether it's 200 people, 1,000 people, 50 people, 10 people, 2 people, once you get that in place, that part, like I'm really comfortable on a stage. I did lots of events before I joined Microsoft. Get comfortable there. Then that's the hardest part, actually, is being comfortable.
Yeah. Excellent. So that takes us into our quick fire question. What excites you about right now, as in what's the thing top of mind that excites you?
I'm really excited actually right now about augmented reality, and I've been taking some master classes on HoloLens in Microsoft, not just because it's part of Dynamics, but I think that what we tend to do in the world in the last 10 years is we tend to push technology through, hyper keywords or whatever you like to say. We have a lot of fluff around stuff, and then it loses its gas. And I think in augmented reality, virtual reality, that it's going through a hype machine, and we're done with this hype machine around it. And what's left is, I think, what I like about Microsoft is they haven't run HoloLens through the hype machine. They've actually tried to find a way to make it highly practical in practical scenarios. And I think that this is what's important, that we need to, I'm a down-to-earth kind of guy. I have one foot always in reality, and I want to live in reality. And I want, when I play with technology, to have it a purpose in the life that I live now, and then dream about what it can do in the future. And I believe that augmented reality and HoloLens actually is there.
Yeah.
It's still rolling. Right, it's still a a minimum viable product plus 5 or whatever, but it's there, right? And I really enjoy this, and I've seen customers use it where they said it was okay. The headset's still a little heavy, so you can't wear it all day, but people in our business want to use augmented reality with their work. So when it gets a little bit lighter, we're going to adopt this 100%. Or when it gets this vision, so.
And the batteries last long enough. Yeah.
The second thing I'm super excited about, and I've always been excited about, is computer gaming. NVIDIA just released some new gaming cards that has some, when you look at the videos around, I can't remember the name off the top of my head, when you look at the videos around what graphics are able to produce, I'm really excited about this stuff. PC gaming has always been what is driven, in my world at least, was always driven the PC maker to make better computers. And as long as they continue to do this, you will see a continued evolvement around graphic cards, everything else, so.
Yeah. So good. What do you wish people ask you that they never do?
Actually, I have this question I left blank because I don't know how to answer this question. This is a great question. I've been thinking about it. I'm like both an extrovert and an introvert. So usually when I'm done giving a demo, for example, I spend a lot of time with the customer, I usually shrink back to myself, and I actually enjoy this quiet time. I wish that people in everyday life were more personal, and I wish people would ask me more about my family, for example, or ask more, ask more about my family, or ask more about how I got to Denmark, or ask, just make personal connection, because I think that it's really easy in our digital world to not have this. So
yeah, so true. What's your best purchase under $100?
I'm gonna do it. It's PC gaming. Go on to Steam Store. They have so many good games under $100 right now. I was just in there. You could think about it. You can buy even the newest game. They'll come out. For example, what do you call it? They'll come out some zombie games here in the near future. You can buy a computer game for €60, €70. Battlefield 5 costs you €70. You put in 200 hours on that game. You can't do anything for the same price of 200 hours, right?
Yeah.
You just look at what it costs and what you get out of it from a pleasure perspective. There's no way. So I would say if you got $100 right now and you like games, go on the Steam Store, start picking away some indie games.
Nice. I agree. Who do you recommend as a guest for this podcast in the future?
I have 3 names on my list, actually. I have James Whitaker. I don't know if you know who he is, but this guy is pretty well known in Microsoft for giving some amazing presentations. Real storyteller. I have Ryan Cunningham from Microsoft.
Yeah, I know Ryan.
And I have a third guy who's not in Microsoft, who is an amazing storyteller, and his name is Paul Hughes. Lives in London,
Paul Hughes.
Maybe Northern Ireland, maybe. Paul Hughes, he has a website called 10 Meters of Thinking.
Mm-hmm.
He tells a story by having 10 meters of paper, where you put the camera on top of it, and he tells a story on this piece of paper as he unrolls it. And it all fits together to one main theme, and then he rolls it up and tells the story backwards. And his website is full of pictures and stuff. He is absolutely brilliant, absolutely amazing. It makes me want to tell more stories. And that's how you know you're a good storyteller. And I'm not saying I'm a good storyteller. You know you're a good storyteller when you inspire other people to tell stories.
Yeah, nice.
All right, so Paul Hughes, and I've just mentioned him on LinkedIn, so if you see one of my last posts.
Okay.
This guy is a storyteller in a way that I could never be a storyteller. It makes me look up to him. Same with James Whitaker, amazing storyteller. There's something there about him and Paul that I aspire to be. Even Ryan Cunningham, I've seen some of his demos where I'm just like, this guy is amazing. Like, I want to be able to touch a person like that.
Yeah. Ryan definitely brings the energy.
You want a non-dynamics guy, but you want to base something around how to tell good stories, not related to technology, Paul Hughes would be your guy.
Fantastic. Patrick, it's been great to have you on the show. Before you go, if people want to connect with you online, where can they find you?
First of all, I'm on Twitter. My handle is Denmark98. I have about, 90,000 followers on Twitter. We can have a long discussion about how to use social media at another time, so you can get me there. Or you can come and find me on LinkedIn. Maybe you can post my LinkedIn stuff in the podcast text or whatever it is. I love to connect. I love to talk. I love to meet new people. So please come.
You've been listening to the Dynamics 365 show. Please consider subscribing to the feed on any great podcast player. Your host was Business Applications MVP Mark Smith, otherwise known as the NZ365 guy. Please check out my YouTube channel. You can find it on youtube.com/NZ365 guy. And if you like it, please subscribe. For show notes or to discuss anything covered in the show, please remember NZ365guy.com/37. Until next time, keep CRMing Keep learning about dynamics and keep growing your practices or your skill sets into that of a master craftsperson.